Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And this is a committee that I had the honor of being the ranking member on last Congress, and I will tell you, it tends to be incredibly bipartisan, and I want to pledge to both of you my support and anything that I can do as you advance this discussion and this agenda, because nothing is more important. Really, it's incredible that the Banking Committee has this responsibility, and it's a responsibility that is absolutely critical to national security. I want to turn to Mr. Zubin and Mr. Zarate. I want to say just on the record that for some reason the job that you two have held attracts absolutely the best and brightest in public service in America. People whose intellect and capability could be earning riches on Wall Street, but yet you serve our country in this very strategic and absolutely essential role of monitoring and implementing sanctions. And I want to thank both of you from the bottom of my heart for your public service. You're true patriots, and your appearance today reinforces that. I think there's a lot of cynicism. Mr. Zubin, I'm going to start with you. There's a lot of cynicism about whether you can, in fact, achieve this result without China participating, and a lot of cynicism about whether China will play the role of, yes, we're on board, but yet we do not see the kind of activity that we need to see given the regional threat that North Korea presents. North Korea's interest is obviously in preventing regime change. That probably is pretty consistent across the board in all of world governments. But this is a very dangerous regional development. And I'm wondering, how do you assess the likelihood of success that China will, in fact, play a critical and important role going forward?
I think that is the question of the hour, Senator Heitkamp.
But I wanted an answer, not a repetition of the question, Mr. Zubin.
I am not going to be repeating the question. I wouldn't dare.
No, I see you.
I think we have a chance. And as I put forward in my written statement, China doesn't start with an opposing set of interests to our own here. China, I think, is made quite nervous by the behavior of this young dictator in Pyongyang. He's gone out of it.
Do you think they feel the urgency that we feel at this point?
Probably not quite. And Kim Jong-un has called out the U.S. as his leading enemy and has a stockpile of nuclear weapons. So, of course, we feel that urgency in a different way from China. But China, I think, would be very glad to see a solution to the nuclear threat to global security. It comes with a lot of headaches for China, including the deployment of THAAD in South Korea and a lot of military attention from the U.S. right off of China's shores. On top of that, I think China would be happy to see a more stable leadership posture out of Pyongyang. So we have a lot of shared interests, but right now the key impediment, I think, to further Chinese cooperation is their fear of a regime collapse. And a regime collapse is a much greater threat to China, given the level of poverty in North Korea, the level of chaos that would unleash right on their border, than anything else that we're talking about today. So this is the key conversation to be had between really senior members of our government and China's government, is not just how do we turn the pressure up, how do we start pushing towards nuclear negotiations, but what does that pressure look like, and what are the next 3 steps after the pressure gets that high? Because China's not going to head into this without knowing those answers.
Do you think secondary sanctions will be viable in this situation?
I think secondary sanctions ought to be considered if the need arises. And the reason I put it that way is they're just a sanctions tool like any other. We saw in the Iran context how powerful they could be, but they were marshaled to a broader strategic effort with diplomacy that was really substantial over a period of years, and they followed on to a series of primary sanctions moves that really had Iran quite isolated. So at the right time, as part of a strategic diplomatic campaign, secondary sanctions may be needed in this context, but I don't think that time is now. Okay. I think they need to be linked to a campaign and not be set out in advance of a campaign.
Mr. Chairman, I want to be respectful of your great generosity, so I'll close there. But yeah, I can expect that we'll be able to file some written questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.